All right. Greetings from the Dark Continent. Conscious Caracal here with another episode of Stream of Consciousness. And tonight I'm talking to someone that, again, I don't think needs any introduction in the South African political YouTuber sphere or community. I'm talking, of course, to Mr. Roman Cabanac of Renegade Report and MorningShot fame. How are you doing, Mr. Cabanac?
Mr. Funzale, one cannot complain in the slightest. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your stream. Really kind of you.
Yeah, no problem, man. Just doing my part to help you get, I was going to say to help you get to 5,000 subscribers, but you seem to have blew that goal out of the water.
Yeah, 4 days ago. And then today I hit 6,000.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a little bit overwhelming, but also quite gratifying that people think my content is interesting. I don't find it terribly interesting quite yet, but I hope to get there one day.
Well, I think it's just a hunger for alternatives, like I keep saying. I think people still want the news given to them, maybe some analysis on the side, the average person, but you give them both. You give them the news stories that you deem interesting and that you deem are noteworthy, and you put some analysis on the side as well to add more quality to your content. And I think that's a winning recipe, especially in the climate where we are now, where mainstream sources are going out of business and you're not really seeing any type of growth there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So, I mean, I think, yes, so I'm sort of like, I use the mainstream as my source, right? So, I mean, if News 24 or The Citizen has an article about X happening, I'll take it as face value because I don't have any other reason to distrust it. But then I'll add my analysis to it. So I'm halfway between reporting the facts and being like an opinionistic columnist. But I'm just trying to merge those two together. And I pick the stories that have the most impact on people, or for people to try and understand the overriding ideology of the state that we are in at the moment. And so that is basically how I do it. That's my modus operandi at the moment.
And I think something that comes in that really gives alternative media its appeal, and especially in terms of the YouTube sphere and the news analysis sphere, is that there's no overtness in terms of you being biased or you having your own views when you analyze the news. In contrast to what we kind of see in the mainstream, which I think that is pissing a lot of people off, and that is where opinion and the own opinions of the journalists themselves are kind of construed as the news. While in this sphere, in the online alternative media sphere, you kind of get exactly what you come for, or you get exactly what you buy. There's no type of hidden agenda or something where someone pretends to be objective or saying that they are just giving you the news and nothing else. People here seem to be wearing their ideologies on their sleeves.
Yeah, it's not even an ideology. It's about what it is, right? So, I mean, mine is, my tagline is Daily Jolt of News Analysis. So it's a jolt because it's less than 10 minutes ordinarily. It's the news and I analyze the news. So I'm telling you exactly what I do. Like there's no hidden agenda by any means. And then I use a variety of sources that I read every day in terms of the books I read, in terms of the papers I read, to sort of try craft an analysis that is hopefully useful and nested in evidence, which is the most important thing. And then I put in my own little spin on it, as someone who actually has I don't have an ideology, so to speak, but I have, a set of principles, or I have a set of values that I think are important to myself. And if more people had those same values, the world would be a better place. But I don't want to proselytize from a church square, but I want to use YouTube to show that you're allowed to have an opinion on things, and that opinion does not need to be widely shared, for the moment at least.
And that's the beautiful thing about the free market of YouTube, is that nobody's being forced to watch your content or to pay some type of licensing fee to watch it. Your viewers are there out of their own free will, and if you are not producing a type of content that people see as valuable, or content that they like to consume, then you're going to have a literal viewer count of 0. So I think that's the beauty of it, is that you have your finger on the pulse in terms of performance and what people want.
Yes, and also I try to interact with people who see my channel a lot. I mean, that's the benefit of a live stream. So a live stream for me is that interaction with the people who watch you. Then you sort of gauge the temperature, right? Who are the people? Who are these people that watch you? What do they want from you? What do they want to hear from you? Do they like you? Do they not like you? And that sort of critical market research through a live stream has been extremely beneficial for me. And it's also a hell of a lot of fun to speak to people who I don't know at all, but who already feel like friends because I remember their avatar, or I remember their like username on YouTube. So you build your own little community on here, which is great.
Yeah, I've also got my own little band of usual suspects that I recognize in the chat with their own sense of humor. We've got our own inside jokes already in this community. So what I've seen now to kind of segue from that is, a lot of media competitors or people that also deal in the business of news moving over to social media platforms like YouTube. We saw shows like The Big Debate now being live streamed on YouTube. We see some of these media channels actually incorporating more of an online presence into their arsenal. What grade would you give their performance in this regard? Do you think they understand what the online media sphere is like in terms of the Wild West, or do you think they're just feeding around in the dark?
No, they don't understand it at all. I mean, obviously, we are dwarfs, compared to them. Sorry if I'm allowed to use that. If I'm allowed to use that term, I will use it. Or little people compared to them, minions, because they just sort of leverage their mainstream platforms to grab YouTube subscribers. But you find in a lot of their videos, all of the comments are off. No one responds to live stream commentary. There is no personality. They're basically just transposing what they put on TV onto the internet. It's just more screens, but it's the same sort of stuff. And whereas this is a vastly different platform. This is an active platform, not a passive one. And if you are not active, you're never going to get very far on it.
And talking about the big debate, I think something that a lot of people, especially in our fan bases, have been talking about, but in South Africa in general, has been that debate between Gareth Cliff and Jamil. And what we saw there was pretty much a nice little peek into the zeitgeist and how it's changed in the past few weeks. Seeing as I would have thought the topics that were discussed there and the themes that were touched on there before COVID-19, I don't think the comment section would have looked the way it looked today. It almost seems like when people are on a ship that's in a storm, they don't really care about the orange, white, and blue paint job during the storm. They'll get to those little petty things that they used to argue about or frame as crises when the real crisis is over. And that's really what I saw from the reaction that debate got. Did you get the same impression?
Oh, in some respects, but okay, I know as someone who's biased towards Gareth, he gave me a start in podcasting, and I actually owe him quite a lot. Gareth has done things with his life, right? He's been like a world-class DJ, right? He has started a business. He does employ people. He worries about bills. He worries about cash flow. The COVID-19 pandemic has a real effect on his ability to produce cash and wealth to employ other people, right? So he has done things. He's a man of action. Jamil Khan has done very few things in his life. He theorizes about things. And if he cannot win the argument, he goes to ad hominem very, very quickly. And it's just this inability for the credentialed class to sort of understand what is actually going on the ground. It's like they cannot read the mood of the country. It's like they were in real lockdown, not for 6 weeks, but for a decade, never ventured outside, and they are somehow flabbergasted when a real person who does go outside comes back inside and tells them, oh, maybe you're a bit wrong in your analysis. Like it's like a lack of processing power that happens there. And I made a point on this morning's video with someone in the presidency called Saul Musker, who is like a baby. He's like he's got to be a literally half a decade ago, even less. This is the sort of person that has never had to hire someone or to fire someone or to worry about cash flow or worry about wages or worry about the variety of things everyone else has to worry about in times of crisis. And because they don't think about those things, whenever they write about a crisis, it always seems extremely patronizing because it is patronizing. And there's this huge disconnect between the credentialed network class of people and the ordinary South African who just wants to get back to work and put food on the table. And that disconnect is larger than ever at this stage.
But something I did pick up on, maybe you did too, was when Gareth was talking about the thousands of emails that he's gotten since he's written that letter. And the people that said, well, he's so brave for saying what he did, and they agree that he said what they were thinking. And he made a remark that was kind of interesting, where he said that something along the lines of, it frustrates him that there are all these people that tell him this is exactly what they think, and they think he's so brave. But what he said was actually something so normal and something so uncontroversial and vanilla. Yet at the same time, thousands of people tell him that they're too scared to say the same thing. Oh, don't you think that's very telling about the society at large?
To some degree, but I mean, you just need one or two people that say those things in public and nothing happens to them, right? Actually, they become wildly popular because they say that. And that's the sort of Donald Trump effect. As I said on another live stream yesterday, if you told me 5 years ago that immigration would be the number one political question in the world, I would have thought you were a mad person. Like, immigration was settled, right? Immigration was settled. They provide wealth for the country. They're not leeches on the state. Immigrants are fantastic. And then Donald Trump says, no, immigrants are not great, and we want to build a wall, and they don't bring their best, and some are rapists, and whatever else he said about them. And this guy wins the American election based on immigration. So it just takes that one person to just tell you the truth. And even for someone like me, who thought I knew the truth back then, and you can get very, very far. But remember, people don't have a platform. They do feel isolated. And so they join platforms like us. They join the community that we create, because we create a platform because those people don't have one.
No, of course, man. And that's why I keep trying to encourage people to just try it. Start a YouTube channel, start a account on social media where you actually put your views a bit more out there, rather than just following all your favorite celebrities. And I think I've seen it happen over the past few years more than I could have ever imagined, or faster than I thought it would happen in terms of South Africa. And it really encourages me to see the amount of people putting their necks out there and just making content. Like I said, it's a free market, so you're not guaranteed viewers. You're not owed any viewers or people listening, but you might as well try. And if you start accumulating people, you will know, even though the free market of YouTube is very merciless and ruthless and cruel sometimes, you will know that the people that tune in are doing it out of their own free will, and you are doing something right to keep those people around. And I think that's the beauty of it. That will encourage people to do it. I know a lot of people that I'm trying to encourage to start putting their views in video form. Quinton Ferreira is one of them in the chat right now.
Oh, yes, Quinton. We've spoken about this, Quinton. I'm going to act like your mother. You need to get on YouTube, my friend. But also, I think perhaps the problem might be that people think that they need 10,000 followers, or they need, or they must drop out of whatever they're doing, or they must leave their job to do this full time, because that's what people tell them to do. And no, I mean, you can have it as a hobby. And if you're honest and you're consistent and you build your own little community, the sky's the limit at the end of the day. And that's something I just figured out in the past 3 months. I've only been doing it for 3 months. I'm still a baby, or maybe a toddler now. And I'm actually very surprised how receptive people are to ideas that one would think would be unacceptable, but they're actually certainly accepted. And people just have to find you at the end of the day.
And you mentioned there that you don't need 10,000 followers or subscribers to start putting your views out there, but you get to 10,000 subscribers or 10,000 followers through putting your views out there. Expecting the one to come before the other is like putting the cart before the horse. you're not going to create or gain a following if you don't put your neck out there and say, well, this is what I believe, and I'm going to take a stand in terms of putting it out there. And I see another content creator is in the chat here. Malcolm Media, the meme king of South African YouTube, asked, have I missed any thug life moments yet?
No, well, Markov, every morning shot video is a thug life moment, and I'm actually a little bit sad that you haven't paid attention to my channel, because I think that would be good content. No, I'm joking. They're not that great. But also in the chat, Karub Mayo, who follows me quite closely and who I have a relationship with, said another possibility is that people might be worried that the state could isolate that person for talking out of turn or for being brave.
Right.
And I think being arrested for creating content is probably the best publicity stunt you could ever want, to be honest. If you do it smart, I mean, if you're just being a racist bastard, no one will care. But if you are considered...
what's his name? Michael Minchin, the Nazi pug guy.
Count Dankula.
Count Dankula, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what happened to him. If all that outrage or absolutely baseless outrage didn't happen around his little meme, he would not be sitting at 800,000 subscribers right now. He would still be an absolute nobody, just the guy making memes online.
Yeah, and it's not about him trying to be arrested by any means. No. It's just a stupid law that was probably misapplied in his case, especially when the judge said the context of something does not matter. Offense is completely objective. I mean, subjective. Sorry, subjective.
Yeah.
Which is a stupid thing to say as a judge. But I think it's you can leverage as Naval Ravikant, who I like a lot, said, we live in a world of infinite leverage. And Ryan Holiday, who's also one of my favorite authors, said, in a world where you can monetize content easier than ever before, why are people studying 4 years, going to debt, and then want to work for like the Washington Post?
Right.
For a mediocre medical aid and a shitty salary and a crap pension. Maybe it's because they're not that great. Maybe it's because they're not creative. Maybe it's because the entire tertiary education system that produces these sort of journalists is completely mediocre and supported by bullshit.
Right.
And I think he has a point there. I'm not a journalist. I never say I'm a journalist by any means, but I've grown 6,000 subscribers in 3 months for content that I find a little bit mediocre, but hopefully better. And I mean, if I can do it as someone who's never done it before, what prevents these journalists from doing it? The ones that snipe at us all the time.
With their journalism degrees and all their experience.
Yeah. And their blue ticks, right? But I see a lot of people are jumping onto podcast. Daily Maverick as a podcast now. I see News 24 as a podcast. I would love to see those numbers because I think they're really terrible. Because alternative media is about texture and personality. You can't just transpose your job into it. It has to be about you as an individual, as a personality. And these people, very few of them have real personalities.
Right. And it is something that I've noticed, and I've tried to warn people that fall into this trap. There's this misconception on the internet, especially now that the internet has become popularized. I mean, I remember back in the day when the internet used to be the fringe of society. Now the entire society is online. But there's this big misconception that people have, and this is exactly what you touched on now, is that if you create the content, they will come. If you create if you just put out good quality content, people will just flock to you, almost like some type of magnet, as if the internet has like a gauge to gauge your content quality and then will promote you as such. That's simply not the case. People flock to people using shitty webcams and shitty mics that have 500,000 subscribers. Why is that? Not because they are producing the highest quality polished content, but because they have a personality, because there's something there. There's something human and of substance there, something that people want to create a community around, something that people can maybe creates content that people can relate to. Maybe this person analyzes the news in a way that people can't find anywhere else, and they don't care about the quality of the production. And when I'm talking about the quality of the content, I mean the quality of production in terms of these big media companies now dipping their toe into podcasts think if they use the best type of microphones and they use their exclusive platforms to promote it, then they're just going to get viewers. It's not going to happen like that, because if they use their platforms to promote it or host it, it's just going to be the same people that read their articles are going to be the people that listen to their podcast. So they're not going to gain any new viewers. They're not going to gain any new audience in a real meaningful sense. It's just going to be this backwash of an echo chamber of the podcast being passed around within the same confined space.
Yeah, and a good example of this is Sticks and Hammer, right? Someone that you've been following for a long time now, almost a decade. The guy has zero.
I introduced Sticks and Hammer to the South African sphere.
Yeah, in some sense, yeah, absolutely. But the guy has no production quality. He doesn't make thumbnails. He sounds a bit crap. His microphone's not fantastic. His camera's awful.
Sometimes he doesn't wear a shirt.
And then when he does, he wears like a big leather jacket, like in the middle of nowhere. When he has a cup of coffee, like he stirs it and he makes like a hell of a lot of noise while he's talking. Like it's completely unprofessional. But he has 400,000 subscribers on YouTube, and because his analysis is so good, he speaks off the cuff for 10 to 15 minutes on a topic, and it amazes me that someone can actually do that. That is. Like, how can I expect like a true skill to have? You won't see any news anchor being able to do that. Right. Have a stream of consciousness for 14 minutes that's coherent about the topic at hand, that leaves you with something tangible. That's a rare skill. What show?
No, you just named this one. This show.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm on it, so yes.
Yeah. No, man, exactly. It's and I mean, to maybe leave the flattering of Mr. Sticks X and Hammer aside, all his videos are one take. I haven't seen one of his videos with a cut in it. So he makes a video of 15 minutes where he just talks, stream of consciousness, like you said. And the thing there is, he is the perfect example of the type of maverick that the internet creates, but also that the internet likes, the type of person that's genuine, the type of person that's real. And I think that's the thing that I like about live streaming, is that everything you see here is real. I don't have that level of IQ where I can script myself for an hour, where I'm going to be able to hide my true intentions or my true views and just put on a facade for hundreds of hours live over the span of 2 or 3 years. Somewhere I'm going to slip if I was playing a character. And I think that's what people like about the live experience, is that it's genuine. You interacting, like you said, with the people in the chat, people in your community. There's a realness to it. They feel like they're talking to a regular person. And I am a regular person, just with a microphone and with a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'm also a regular person. Someone asked me to transcribe my notes for my shows. And I said to him, I don't have any notes for my shows. I read the article, I understand it, I give you a few details, and then my analysis is completely off the top of my head. Whether it's correct or incorrect, it's too late because it's uploaded on the internet forever. So I don't have notes. I don't script things in advance. I do the video in 2 to 3 hours and then it's up. And the world can see it for what it is. So once again, that if you have to be a mainstream journalist, that is like Satanism, right? That is like just something you don't do. You have to pronounce the names correctly. You have to have the dates perfect, and people don't care about the micro details. They want, what are the things that are important and why are they important? And if you answer those two questions, which I hope I do on MorningShot, I think that's essentially what people want. I assume, at least for now.
And no, to move on to a different topic that I wanted to discuss with you, you made a tweet a few days ago, I can't remember when, where you were observing the moves being made by Mr. Steenhuisen at the helm of the DA, or at his temporary position as at the helm of the DA. I think that election's now been postponed in terms of the new leadership, right?
Yeah, so it's to sometime in October, I believe, yes.
But anyway, you made a tweet where you said you were along the lines of something like you liked what you saw. You saw some type of glimmer there in regards to how he was running the DA or helming the DA. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, just look at in context. The past year, so the elections happened almost a year ago to the day. It has been probably the most difficult year in DA history by a long margin. And if you compare the DA to now compared to what they were before the election, I think there's a marked difference. He has taken that party by the scruff of its neck. Have you noticed that a lot of the people that were, let's just say, happy to be controversial on Twitter are no longer controversial at all? He's helmed them in to some degree, and he is not relying on mainstream media to spread the message of the DA. He's got his own platforms, namely alternative Facebook videos and the rest of them, right? They're still a little bit too professional for me, but the concept is a fine one. And if you look at what comes out of the DA in terms of policy, in terms of how they react to this lockdown, I have a few problems with that, but that's beside the point. There is some genuine critical thinking and sort of a genuine game theory happening within the DA. It's not to the level where I want it to be. It's not, to me, it's not radical enough. It's not trolly enough. But it's in the right direction. And that's essentially what I want to say in that tweet. The DA is much more organized now. And we have a clearer picture of what they actually stand for. And I think that's a good thing for the DA. I think because if you don't know what a political party stands for, then it's not a political party. It's just a menagerie of characters around a particular cult. But no, I think he's done well. And as the leader, he should take credit. Whether he is responsible for it or not is another question. I'm sure he is, though. But he's done well, especially considering that he's an interim leader, not the actual leader, for now at least.
Yeah, but now let's detach his performance record or his report card that you just gave him from your own personal impressions, and move to, do you think there's a place in South African politics for his style of leadership or the type of leadership that he's brought to the DA? Do you think it will attract the South African electorate? Do you think there's any type of potential there for great success? Or do you think he's only going to regain the DA voters that were lost in the previous election and not really make ground in terms of gaining that electorate that's staying away, that's never voted DA ever in their lives?
I think it's too early to tell at this point. It's only a year since the last election. I think people have a clear understanding what the DA is about, which is a good thing. I just wanted to say, am I allowed to swear on your stream of consciousness? Sure. All right. Like, I really wanted to say one day, if you don't like me, just fucking don't vote for me. Like, I don't care. Like, I will get my own constituency. If you like me, fantastic, come join me. If you don't, I don't care about you. Like, I don't care what you think. And that has happened to some degree. They don't respond to every bullshit article. They don't fight on Twitter. They don't get bogged down in bullshit. They focus on the work. Whether that work will be enough to regain, maybe. I think regaining is important now. Will they grow? Not yet. It's too early to tell. But I think if they become a bit more radical and a little bit more arrogant, especially in the Western Cape, they can go far as a political party. They can really go far.
I saw here in the chat, and this is definitely a piece of advice I would give John as well. The Dodgy Idolist asks or says, I wonder when Steenhuisen will unblock me. I think he has blocked quite a few people that he needs to unblock just for decency's sake. I think that these are people that weren't malicious towards him, but I don't know why. Maybe he blocked them. I know of quite a few people. Maybe that would be my advice to him.
Yeah, no, I also know a few people blocked by him. And yeah, well, I actually want to say, I wrote a piece about Anna Windy needs to be arrested.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I know a lot of people in the DA read it, and I know quite a few of them liked it. And it was sort of a shot across the bow from me. Like, here's a dare. Like, will you go at least 50% of the way in the Western Cape? Because you control it, and you have a constitutional mandate, a democratic mandate to rule the Western Cape. Are you going to let the National Command Politburo People's Republic Council of Azania tell you how to, rule the Western Cape? But we haven't seen that yet.
So here's actually something, an interesting remark from Mr. Wotan. He says, I like a lot of what John says, but like I said, where was he through April. Where was he when DA peeps were snitching left and right? A boss move would have been if he ordered everyone in the Western Cape not to enforce. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, I agree with that sentiment entirely. There are a few complications in terms of the law. The police is a national competence, so the ANC runs the police. So Alan Winde, as a premier, has no control over the police. He has control over the Metro Police of Cape Town, but JP Smith, who is the MEC for Safety and Security, or something to that effect, he loves his brown shirts and his boots on the ground approach as well, and he's quite zealous in terms of enforcing bylaws, bullshit bylaws, by the way, in the Western Cape. And I do understand there's a bit of tension in the Western Cape on that proposal. I mean, to me, I don't know why the DA can't take all the power it has to make the Western Cape like the Singapore of South Africa. Like, really, especially in terms of rates. It's very expensive to live there, especially in terms of electricity, especially in terms of like the bullshit laws about you have to register your solar panel with the city and crap like that. That's all just crap, man. Like, that's just nonsense. It's just complicating things for no reason. But I mean, I don't live in hope because I think hope is a stupid characteristic. But I just have this I just have this intuition that the DA is in a much better place now than before, and that's good for South African democracy, whether you like the DA or not.
No, I definitely agree there. But I think I share your sentiment in regards to I want to see the DA become more of a Maverick party. Really, I mean, they've got nothing to lose. If they don't make serious gains before the next municipal election, they're fucked. I'm just going to outright say it, man. They are.
You think so?
I think in the longer run, yes, they're not going to be dead. They're not going to just evaporate into nothing. But their whole rebuilding project is going to have to start with making a big statement during the next municipal elections, I reckon.
Yeah, I think it might be a bit too soon, but I see your sentiment, and you're probably right. For me, it's 2024. Once the ANC loses power.
You were talking to Herman recently about that.
Yeah, well, his thesis and the thesis of the Institute of Race Relations is that the ANC will lose the next election due to all the trends being against them and the COVID-19 pandemic accelerating those trends. And I think that is correct. I think they are correct in that regard. What comes after that is anyone's guess. So it's not necessarily perhaps a very good thing for the ANC to lose power. I know that might be controversial on your platform, but the chaos after that, who knows where this country will go.
It's not controversial on my platform because I've said it on my platform where, yes, I'm not the biggest ANC fan, but we also need to keep into perspective. And I mentioned this in the chat when you were talking to Herman. Just because the ANC is losing support, that doesn't mean that lost support is going towards the DA. Actually, on the contrary, they're not going to the DA. They're just not voting. And the ones that are still voting are going to the EFF in droves. So maybe be careful what you wish for, just in regards that there's nothing to fill the gap at the moment. So when the ship is gone, there might not be a replacement for it, and you might just be dumped into the cold water.
Yeah, but what do you think about Herman Mashaba? I have huge doubts.
I think he's got some potential to actually capture that center-right group in South Africa that has not been represented in 30 years by any party. The group that should be represented by the IFP, but the IFP's ethnic connections in terms of their Zulu connotations is alienating a lot of potential voters, which is I completely understand. I mean, I wouldn't tell the IFP to throw away that identity. I think that would also be a mistake on their part. But South Africa needs a center-right party to specifically socially right party to galvanize the huge potential that is here, if that exists. I'm going on my own life experience and from what I've seen in terms of the sentiment of South Africans in the polling. I'm not the biggest supporter of the silent majority theory of South Africa has this mass of absolutely fucking phenomenal people that just are silent. Because it's for the past 10 years, every year it's been a good year for that silent majority to actually say something, and they don't. So I'm starting to doubt whether, in terms of the image that has been created or painted of that theory, actually holds true. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that South Africa has a massive centre-right population that would grab onto any type of party that gives them a little bit of a foothold in regards to that type of worldview. And I think Michelle could be that body, or he could be that leader. He has the potential.
He has the potential, but I think he's already made many mistakes, especially by hiring old DA guys who lost the party a lot of votes. Also, the sort of like no skin in the game sort of, policy expert people, like hire spaza shop owners, dude. Like, hire taxi drivers, hire shepherds, hire taxi bosses as well. Like, like hire real people who sort of understand economics and who understand, and this term is used by our enemies, but who understand the lived experience of people. And if you have that, you can craft a narrative that's really, really true, right? That has a lot of texture and people can buy into. Hiring ex-disgruntled DA guys to run your campaigns, I don't know. It seems like a massive mistake to me, but it's still early days for that. Yeah. Assuming it's a party at this stage, I'm not too sure.
I think my main comment there, the bottom line of it would be that he is the type of politician. If I'm listening to what he's saying, looking at his platform, that is the type of politician that I think would inhabit that centre-right position that I've been describing. Whether he's going to personally be that politician, I think it's too early to tell. But if someone else fills that void, they're going to be a pretty damn close to a Mashaba clone in terms of what they're saying, because he's saying all the right things.
Yeah, for now, when it suits him, and that's my big problem. He blows hot and cold, and it seems. Yeah. I know we got Wotan in the chat, who's a big fan, and I respect that. But he blows a bit hot and cold, and I think principles do matter essentially. And I'm not too sure exactly whether he will stick to principles in times of crisis. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but talking about Herman Mashaba's platform, something that I think is really shooting the EFF in the foot and that's keeping them back is their strange decision to back the Pan-Africanist horse rather than the nativist horse. As we said in the beginning of this entire stream, the entire world is moving towards localism and nativism, and people looking inwards rather than outwards for where their prosperity is going to come from. But the EFF, for some reason, has, as Trevor Noah said in his skits when he was talking about South Africa, when the whole world said we're going this way, South Africa says we're going this way. And the EFF seems to have taken that route, where and I've joked on Twitter, I said, the EFF are definitely don't have South African advisors. They seem to have some foreign advisors, because this whole idea of Pan-Africanism and open borders is a foreign idea. It's what a bunch of fucking campus progressives in the US are talking about. It's hip and trendy there, but not in South Africa. You can't be farther from the average sentiment in South Africa. So my message to the EFF would be, if you want to really capture the populist or nativist wave that we're seeing, fire your international advisors and hire locally. It'll greatly improve your prospects.
But true. I also struggle to understand. I sort of understand it in terms of it fits the ideology. In terms of, if you look at communism, it's not nativist. It is not nativist at all. It's actually imperial in nature. It's an imperialist doctrine, and I see why they are like Pan-Africanist in this regard. But even in terms of like a crisis like this, they have a book club. Like that's their contribution to the crisis.
Guys, you're populist. This is your playground. A crisis is your literal playground. This is your time to shine.
You could, I mean, with your VBS money, you could, instead of donating 6 million rand to the Solidarity Fund, just buy 6 million rand worth of groceries from spaza shop owners and just dish those out to people left and right. Yeah, like, I don't know. It's just, I'm a bit baffled. And it makes me think, if Julius is the most savvy politician in the country, the standards are outrageously low at this stage. Right. If he's making these very basic errors, and these are not errors. I mean, I'm not a professional analyst like our friend Eusebius by any means, but even to me, as someone who will never vote for the EFF, the errors are very obvious, and I can't explain them, and that annoys me. Because maybe they are much more intelligent than I think, and I'm underestimating them too. Or they are what they are, and they are idiotic, and I'm right, but it's difficult to tell.
No, man, and but that's why I'm saying I think they're getting their policy direction and their policy advice from people that are not local, people that are not South African or really know the South African zeitgeist and where it's going, because the nativism and localism are the future, and you're going to have to catch that wave. And I see a lot of populists in other countries very, very effectively latching onto that wave and reaping the benefits. And I'm just seeing South Africa's brand of populists floundering about and not knowing what they're doing. And
I think the pandemic accelerates that national populism. I think people are going to trust local a lot more. I see apples out of China. They're building in India, rather, Japan as well. The sort of globalization will exist, don't get me wrong, but certainly not to the same degree. And I think people will trust what they know rather than have the sort of consumerist aspect where cheapest is best. They're going to wonder who made it. Are the hands who made that the same hands as the people who like make burgers at McDonald's in my town? Like that sort of localist mentality, I think, is going to be, hopefully, will be a consequence of this pandemic.
And talking about squandered opportunities, back in the day, feels like years now, when I featured on your show, I think it was episode 12, when I went on your lockdown show, I said this very controversially. I didn't see anyone in the chat agreeing with me that the COVID-19 pandemic could be one of the best things that ever happened to the ANC, using the logic that they could use it to their advantage, and then for the next 10 years, they have the most excellent excuse for lackluster economic growth. And I've kind of reassessed my stance there. I made a thread about it on Twitter. Very big emphasis now on could have. They could have really benefited from this, and they've just let it slip. I mean, to put it very shortly, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on whether you think this could have worked out for them. If I was the ANC, what I would have done is I would have, back in when they announced the lockdown, when information was scarce, the whole world was panicking. The only real case study we had was China and Italy, and the horror story of Italy was pretty much the thing that people were using. That's when the ANC said they were going to have a lockdown. They had massive support. A lot of people in our own circles supported the lockdown to varying degrees. And I would have thought that the ANC would have then did a strict 21-day lockdown, where they take away things that shouldn't have been banned so they can use them as leverage later, like alcohol and cigarettes. And I thought that after that 21-day lockdown, they're going to say, okay, we're going to ease the lockdown, but not yet. We're going to extend it by 2 weeks, but we're going to give you your booze and your cigarettes and a bunch of other little concessions. And people would have eaten it up. Ramaphosa would have come out, did his little My Fellow South African speech. We're going to have to stand together. Thank you for your patience. We've made a lot of progress, but we're still almost there, not out of the woods yet. People would have eaten it up. Those 2 weeks pass, and then they start saying, okay, and after those 2 weeks, you get all this new information that we have now across the world, where economies are opening. A lot of economies that are actually ideologically pretty much aligned with us are starting to slowly open as well. And then the ANC can say, okay, we're going to follow their example. It seems to be working. Thank you, South Africa, for your big sacrifice. We really appreciate it. We understand it. We're going to slowly start opening it. They go through the motions another 2 weeks, but it's pretty much open now. Ramaphosa 2.0 fully established, a big shot in the arm for the ANC. They showed decisive leadership when they needed to. They made the hard decisions. They saved lives, but they also had the foresight and the bigger picture perspective to now save the economy while also saving lives. Double whammy, double win. And I think it would have been better. But now back to reality, where they are giving COVID-19 relief based on race and arresting surfers on the beach.
Yeah, they do tend to, clutch defeat from the jaws of victory at the best of times. And it goes down to, Franz Grenier spoke to Russell Lamberti on Russell's podcast a few weeks ago. And people are always surprised at like the schizophrenia, right? Like hot food is banned because for reasons unknown, but it's not in the regulations. But the reason for hot food being banned is because the restaurants can't give out hot food. So in terms of equality, we need to ban hot. Like it's just nonsense. So you see the ideology coming out when you give an ideologue immense power. They're going to use it for the ideology, and that ideology has very little to do with the matter at hand, and that's what we've seen. And I think Ibrahim Patel, the fact that he hasn't spoken in 3 weeks, whatever it is actually good for him. We actually need more of him on the stage to delegitimize the lockdown even more. But the problem is the ANC has done very little to mitigate the essence or the consequences of such a lockdown. Sorry, there's a helicopter overhead. I hope you don't hear it.
I can hear it, man.
That's probably the Guptas or something. Who knows? They're not too far away. But once the ideology creeps in to the regulations that have nothing to do with COVID-19, and then there's increased doubt about the entire edifice of the lockdown, people start creating conspiracy theories about it all the time, and it delegitimizes the lockdown immensely. Right. And that's what they've done. And it gives me great hope that they still remain as incompetent as I expected them to be. So yeah, I think they shot themselves in the foot, and I think we're going to drag along the bottom until 2024. They'll probably lose that election, but once again, we don't know what comes from there. The easy win for them would be strict lockdown. We're going to, borrow 20 billion. We're going to shut down SAA. We're going to give 10 billion to like every person as an income grant for the next 6 weeks, and food parcels and all the rest, not based on race at all. They could follow Lenin's first 5-year plan, where he said we need capitalism for the next 5 years to make the revolution viable. Right. They could have had the 5-year plan being a 6-week plan. Let's be like ardent capitalist about this as much as possible, and then afterwards we can fuck them over. But no, they fucked people over during the lockdown, and they'll continue to do so after the lockdown. It's a no-win situation for them.
Yeah, and something that I think a lot of people notice now, and I think you touched on it, is the whole Karen phenomenon, where you get these Sea Point Oaks that are the joggers there that took the picture of Cyril Ramaphosa when he first came onto the scene in terms of the big when he was competing now for the head of the ANC, and they backed him because he's a real person. He jogs with us here next to the beach. And those same people seem to have now had their, like I said, Ramaphoria 2.0. But do you think after this lockdown, the whole idea of Ramaphoria is going to be good and dead? It just did a little dead cat bounce? Or do you think it's going to be with us for much longer?
I think elements of it will be around for a lot longer, because the mainstream narrative is that there are two factions in the ANC, which is nonsense. To me, Cyril is the radical economic transformations faction's leader. That's obvious the way he talks about it. And it's obvious in the way that he talks about the massive reset of the economy for Black people in the main, to use his exact words. But, I mean, it's just about the appetite for what reform actually is. Some people think that reform is cutting the wage bill by like a percentage point over the next 3 years, and assuming that's like real reform. It's like, no, like real reform is doing away with the essence of race nationalism as a policy. That's real reform, not tinkering on the edges. But a lot of people think tinkering on the edges is indicative of true reform. And once you have a lowered standard of competence, Ramaphoria will always exist, and hope will always exist. And once you're hopeful, those are the people that die first in the war, I'm afraid.
No, exactly, man. I think what we've seen here, though, in regards to Ramaphoria and everything that accompanies it and the mentality where it sprouts from, is I think a lot of more people are aware of what type of people support Ramaphosa no matter what type of people are, and how far are they willing to stoop in regards to their mental gymnastics to defend him. In regards to everything he does is 4D chess and all as part of a bigger plan. The saying that cigarettes are going to be sold, but then pulling it back is actually part of a big master plan. It's interesting to see how people rationalize it in their minds. It seems like Mr. Cyril can't do anything wrong, while at the same time, someone that works for Mr. Cyril says with the utmost amount of confidence that if the DA under John Steenhuisen were in charge, masses of people would be dead already.
Yeah, and also they put Tito Mboweni out as like the canary in the coal mine who knows the joke. Like this is the rational guy, this is the reformist guy who wants a land bank. I mean, he wants a state-owned bank, and he wants like a variety of other nonsense things. Okay, he doesn't want to print money. Okay, cool, great. He's a bit of a pragmatist. But if Tito Mboweni is your idea of a pragmatist, the Overton window shifted so far left that we don't even know what is right anymore. And I think they use Tito, and Tito is a willing participant in this, to sort of gauge the temperature of the public through his tweets.
Right.
But he's in on the joke, and the ANC is in on the joke. But analysts think they're two separate people or two separate entities, and they're really not. They're the same.
Not just that. They think Cyril and the ANC are two separate entities. How many times have you seen the analysis point, very intellectually made, that Cyril is making all the right calls, but he's just being undermined by his ministers that he put there, and still keeps around. No, Tito Mboweni has a very specific role, and I've said this for a while now. He's the good cop. ANC is the bad cop. ANC's got a lot of bad cops, but they've got one good cop, and he knows his role very well. He plays it very well. And his role is to pretty much, as you've seen in the classic routine of good cop, bad cop, if you're not willing to tell the bad cop what you want through threats, the bad cop leaves the room, good cop comes in and tells you, oh, don't worry, free market, capitalism, equal opportunity, don't worry, communism, Marxism, bad, free market, good. And then everyone's like, oh, our hero, Tito's going to save the day. But he doesn't turn any of his rhetoric into anything. His rhetoric is just there to keep you passive and to keep you hopeful that he's going to turn everything around. Just like Cyril was supposed to turn ESCOM around when he was in charge of that. So, yeah, Tito, I completely agree with you. Tito knows his role very well. And people need to start, the commentariat who are supposed to be giving us our intellectual analysis don't really seem to be catching on. They think Tito is this renegade within the ANC. But do you see the tone of his tweets? That feeds into this role of him. He's playing a character, and the character is he's a renegade. He's a maverick. He says things, and then oh no, the ANC told me to shut up now. The ANC says I should tweet less. The ANC says I need to think more like them, but I'm not going to. I'm your guy on the inside. That's his character. That's what he does.
And he's the loudest after something happens, right? So booze and alcohol are still bad. Oh, I was against it, by the way. I was against it. But I lost the argument. Cyril and I lost the argument. Like, there was no argument. There was no argument in the first place. But Adrian Basson keeps falling for it, all the time. I mean, I saw his live stream, which was awful. At the State of the Nation address. No, they built the set which was like pure white and like it reflected. It was terrible. Anyway, so Adrian Basson says after Sona, he's like, oh, he's speaking to TD, who I like a lot. TD is like a reporter, a journalist for News 24, one of her senior reporters. Big lady, like she grilled me, and she's actually very good. I have a lot of respect for her. And he's talking to TD. He's like, TD, you can see that during the course of the State of the Nation address, the Cyril Ramaphosa is, indicating that the looters must like be this. And TD is like black, right? She's like, Adrian, you have no idea what the hell you're talking about. like your entire analysis is complete bullshit. She didn't say those words, but you can see it in the tone. Like he still believes. When the ANC controls your mind that much, for you to believe there's good cop, bad cop, for you to believe there are two factions, for you to believe reform is even possible, then, I mean, where else do you go from here? You live in eternal hope forever and ever and ever until Cyril comes in, like, really just, like, has to, like, literally fuck you in the ass without lubrication until you, like, figure it out that this guy's not great. He's not your savior. No, but until then, it's not going to happen.
Oh, I've just rephrased it a little bit. So there is definitely a good cop and a bad cop, but they're part of the same police station. They just do very specific roles. And it's like I think someone here in the chat actually said it's this one. It feels like pro wrestling, and I couldn't agree more because I wanted to say it's like a fight between two characters on Siemandalan. where and then you think the two actors are really mad at each other and they pretend. And we've seen this in Hollywood, where celebrities when they play a role, they play an antagonist on a show, on a movie or whatever. In real life, they'll put on a show of like, no, actually the actors also don't like each other, and it adds intrigue and it adds like depth to the show, whatever. That's what we're seeing here. Tito's playing a role. Cyril's playing a role. Becky Chele is playing a role. They're playing characters. They're not themselves.
No. And there's a term in wrestling called kayfabe, where the audience knows it's fake. The people who perform the stunts know it's fake. The entire premise is fake, but people like the fact that it's fake and carry on as if it's not fake. So everyone's in on the joke and carry on with the joke, pretending that it's real. But if you look from the outside, you're like, everything's fake, guys. And they're like, yeah, of course it's fake, but it's just fun. But Adrian's a guy that's like, everything's fake. And he doesn't understand why people don't tell him why it's fake.
Fakeness, but not for it being fake. He's not playing the role. He's actually, I don't think he's playing the role. I think he's actually enveloped in it. But he would be the fictional anchor within their film, analyzing these two characters that are real in their fictional world. But he's doing it without knowing. He's not in on it. He's not on the set. He doesn't know. He's like the Truman Show, where he doesn't know that he's a character in a film. He thinks everything around him is real, and he's analyzing it very seriously as if it's real. Exactly.
No, that's a very good analogy. And well, unfortunately, he's the top editor of the top news website in the country, I'm afraid. So that's who we're dealing with. And it's like, it's any wonder that our platforms are growing when you have like that person as the opposition, right?
Yeah. And someone actually, I saw a tweet that I retweeted that actually made a good point. He said, why are journalists not asking any questions? Which hospitals are full? How accurate are these testing kits? Where's the data that matters? Please, anything other than regurgitated government press releases. I couldn't agree more. I think that's a genuine concern among a lot of people, is that we're not getting investigative journalism. We're just getting polished versions of government press releases.
Yeah, and then when there is investigative journalism, like the Gupta leaks, which was orchestrated by Pravin Gordhan, no doubt. I can't say that as a fact, but there's good evidence to suggest he did it. It's also just regurgitation of the anti-Zuma faction of the ANC.
Right.
It's important investigative work, don't get me wrong. I mean, it tells us a lot about what we've done. But as Frans Cronje, I do mention Frans Cronje quite a lot, but as Frans Cronje said, state capture is a term coined by the hard left of the ANC. So they can blame the Guptas, the Zumas, and white monopoly capital colluding together to enslave the public or to impoverish the masses or things like that. And the media took hold of this narrative and just ran wild with it like you can't believe. And what has fundamentally changed? Not much.
Yeah, and I think another good example of that exact thing playing out is if you look at Ernst Rutz's book compared to that, what's it called? The Lost Boys of Bird Island, that book.
Yes.
Two investigative books that are trying to give you facts about a controversial thing, but the one is very clearly has an agenda to vilify a certain group within South Africa. The other one just wants to give you the stats about a case or about a phenomenon that the author deems as serious. And some bookstores didn't even have Ernst Rutz's book. It wasn't displayed anywhere. It was kind of hidden back in the corner. It was there if you asked, but you couldn't really find it. That Lost Boys of Bird Island book was everywhere. It was pretty much on every shelf in the windows of all the shops. It was pretty much put out there as you need to read this book. And now it's been pulled from all bookstores nationwide. It just shows that the real investigative work that's going on is not really the work that's going to be necessarily praised.
Yeah, true. And so, I mean, basically, is this like just shitting on mainstream media evening? If it is, I'm down with it. I'm down with it. But no, it's absolutely true. And I read. Well, I didn't read Boys of Bird Island or whatever it's called. I read Ernst's book, and I found it very insightful at the time. And I put up I think I wrote maybe the only like mainstream review for it.
Yeah, in Report, you had a translated version.
Yeah, in Report and then in Politics Web. But that's the only sort of review I saw in like corporate media. And this was an important book, right? It's about an important topic. but people try to ignore it. But I think it still became a bestseller anyway, right?
No, it did. And for example, this whole that Bird Island book, I remember, was on all the radio stations. They were talking about it because it was so controversial. And I remember it was when I was driving to Pretoria, I think. I can't remember why. Anyway, I was driving a long road and I was listening to it I only had my radio. And I was listening to it on RSG, and I just remember saying, because they said, send in your opinions on an SMS, we will read them out. And they didn't read any of my SMSs, and they weren't controversial things. They were just pretty much exactly what everyone now is saying, even people within the mainstream media post this book being retracted. But back when it was fresh and people were promoting it, these types of thoughts were too controversial. So it just shows the power of the zeitgeist around you and the power of the media still.
Yeah, and it just shows like what is deemed to be heresy becomes the truth later on. I mean, if you said that you would vote for Donald Trump in 2015, like you'd be, exercised from your community like you can't believe.
Yeah.
So people just become dishonest when asked questions, right, in the polling. Every time I say I'm going to vote for Donald Trump, I get shat on from great heights. I just won't tell people I'm voting for Donald Trump. And then people get surprised when Donald Trump wins. That's a problem when you have a narrative at the end of the day. It backfires on you tremendously.
Just a little side note, the chat's been absolutely top class tonight. So here's just an example. Christos asked, where the hell is Cyril? And Sideline Opinion says Cyril is self-isolating.
Not from COVID-19, just from the presidency.
Just from criticism.
Yeah, from anything. I mean, to be fair, I think it works in our favor if Cyril doesn't pitch up. Because whenever he comes on, the chattering classes love him. And then NTZ comes on and fucks everything up. So we need more NTZ, more Patel, less Cyril.
You just want more chaos, Roman.
I don't want more chaos. I want more honesty. NTZ's honest. She's honest. She's just a authoritarian little troll. Becky's an authoritarian oaf. And Balula's a clown.
Maybe a question more for the chat than for you, because I know you've noticed it. Something I've seen, and I think a lot of people in the chat have noticed it as well. We started off this lockdown with the main sentiment being, we're going to beat this virus. We need to stop this virus. We need to save lives. The virus is the big threat. To now, where it's gradually moved now 1 centimeter at a time, to where we're not talking about the virus anymore. We're talking about how can this pandemic or this crisis be used to restructure the economy, to transform the economy, to further the NDR, to make our society more equal. You know what? The virus is not really the big threat. The big threat is inequality. That's the big crisis, or the big crisis is racism and privilege. And that's what we're going to set right. I mean, you got a little taste of this in Gareth Cliff's debate. Very ironically, the guy, Jamil, accuses Mr. Cliff of wanting to benefit from the deaths of people, and then he ends the debate by saying, if anything good comes from this, it will be a different economy or a different world. I'm like, well, you're pretty much doing exactly what you're accusing Mr. Cliff of.
Yeah, and then the very next day, Kasatu comes out and says, basically, go to level 1 of the lockdown because this is bullshit. Like those right-wingers, the horrible right-wingers called Kasatu, right? Like, what does Jamil think about that?
Yeah.
I know ideology is a weird thing, man. It's a really weird thing. I'm ideological in some sense, but I have doubts about my own ideology, and I think that I think that's a healthy thing to have. It's good to doubt what you know. Sometimes.
No, exactly. I think that's how a lot of people come in these circles come to their conclusions. Is not through, and that's why I always tell my audience as well. Please don't parrot what I say or my guests say. Take what we say and digest it and come to your own conclusions. Create your own views. You don't need a label. You don't have to be called something. I really hate this new phenomenon of everyone has to be something, and you need to put that label in your Twitter bio. And as soon as you stray a little bit from what is expected from of a libertarian or a leftist or a conservative or whatever, people point it out as some type of hypocrisy. And but conservatives aren't supposed to be saying this. I'm not anything. I don't really use a label. I don't like labels. I'm a Van Zylist, dude. I've got my own views on the world, and if people want to put me in the box, they can try, but I'm not going to play along.
It's like you like ethnic Van Zylist, so you like a micro whatever, ethnic supremacist. Just the fun sales. Everyone else can go get stuffed.
I want to what's best for my people. My people is me.
Yeah.
No, it's just I think it's a fruitless endeavor to try and put labels on yourself, and it's just these people that put labels in their bios in terms of trying to build an identity around it. It's just fueled by pure narcissism, man. Like really, it's nothing more than you just trying to be to build an identity, and that's one of the building blocks or the bricks that you use. I am a libertarian. I am an anarchist, anarcho-capitalist, or whatever you want to call yourself. I don't think it serves any purpose. I might be wrong. I don't see the purpose in it.
But also, it's also an attempt to respond to the overwhelming nihilism of our culture that has been around arguably since the World War II. Now like believing in God is deemed to be a pathology, right? Believing, like wanting to be married, to the first person that you love is considered weird. Wanting to have children is polluting the earth. And we're all going to die. We lead worse lives than our parents. Whatever, climate change is going to kill us all. Like there's this overwhelming nihilism in our culture. And I think people try to deal with that nihilism by constructing themselves as something. But that something is built on a foundation of straw at the end of the day. And it's very easy to pick apart. That's why identity is actually very important, but not individual identity. It's your identity within the context of where you are.
Right.
Like my identity as a father and as a husband is vitally important. My identity as Roman, me, myself, whatever, anarcho-libertarian, it's less important.
Yeah.
It's far less important.
It seems like exactly what you're describing now, but it seems that people are filling that void by grasping vapid identities rather than meaningful ones. For example, cultural identity in South Africa, I think, is a very important thing. A lot of people that I know that are proud Zulus and proud Tswanas and proud Afrikaners are very healthy individuals. They've got a very strong sense of identity. They don't hate other people. They just strongly love their identity or their group or their culture. Doesn't mean they want to go imperialist and then wipe out everyone else because they are not like them. They just want to be themselves and they want their culture or their values preserved. And it's seen in my own personal experience. Like I said, if anecdotes were data, then we would be living in a different world. But in my own personal experience, people with a strong sense of healthy identity in terms of being proud in terms of themselves, for example, having identity as a father, proud Tswana or a proud Zulu or a proud Afrikaner, someone that is proud of their identity as a pillar of the community. Those people are psychologically very healthy in my experience, and people that are not struggling with a lot of problems when it comes to knowing who they are, knowing what their purpose here is, and knowing what they want to achieve in life and what their ambitions are.
Yeah, and very true. And also, that's why I read this book called Atomic Habits, and it is a self-help book. Excuse me. It is deemed a self-help book. But in the first chapter, he says, habits are not just things to make you better or like more efficient or like be like a rock star CEO. Habits is actually a form of identity. And that is so true. Someone's a soldier, not because they not only because they are in the army. They're a soldier because they polish their boots every day, because they go on marches with Bergens and guns and whatever, because they practice hygiene, they practice a variety of things that make them a soldier. The fact that you're in the army does not make you a soldier. It's the habits ingrained in you within the army that makes you the soldier. So the habits that you ingrain determine your identity. And that was what's so fascinating about that book. And that's the biggest takeaway from me is identity is a doing thing. It's an action. It's not just something you are. It's something that you do every day. And you don't have to justify it. People will just know what it is.
No, exactly. And I think that's the whole central point of it is that I think people should be allowed to form healthy, not allowed, but people should be encouraged to form healthy identities. Don't build an identity around I am straight libertarian and that is my identity. Those are vapid identities. Those are vapid identity bricks. What you really need to be latching onto is meaningful types of identities, like, for example, the habits that you continuously do, the type of values that you think make you a good member of society, or a good member of your community, rather, and the things that make you in a genuine sense, and not just in a superficial sense of I'm bisexual and I read Marx. That's my identity. Like, but it's easy.
Yeah.
That's the easy thing to do. That's the easy way out, is to say, well, I am what I read, or I am what is in my Twitter bio. But it can't be farther from the truth.
Yeah, and that's why Jordan Peterson's interview with GQ, with that woman from GQ, was one of the most insightful interviews I've ever seen, because he says at the end, he says, you know what's really annoying is that I've heard every single question you have posed before. I can swap you with anyone who are in your class and I will have the same interview with them. I don't know who you are. All I hear is pure ideology that's been taught, or that you've imbibed, or that you partake in. But I don't know who you are. We've been talking for 2 hours and I still have no idea who you are as a person, because you don't have an identity. And I thought that was such a profound statement to make. He can just swap that interview with anyone else and it would be exactly the same interview. And that's sick. Like, that's a sick burn. I know it's slang, but like, that's a proper sick burn. And I thought, geez, I would never want that to be said about me.
No, it's a deep burn.
Yeah, huge, like massive.
Yeah, and I think that's what we saw on display in Gareth Cliff's debate. I mean, just if I've never heard of Gareth Cliff in my life and never heard of Jamil in my life, and I watched that debate, I would have a pretty good idea of what type of person Gareth is, but I would have no idea of what type of person Jamil is. He's just a placeholder for leftism. That's all I thought. You
can replace him with Konrad Koch. You can replace him with Nicholas Bauer. You can replace him with whoever the hell you want. It'll be the same.
As opposed to someone on the left like Slavoj Zizek, which you can actually see a personality behind, even though he's not possessed by ideology. He actually understands ideology quite well, even though I don't agree with him ideologically.
No, not at all. But at least, some of it, But I think people take ideology as identity. I think that maybe that's what we're trying to say in a very roundabout way, and it isn't. And it isn't. Ideology is a sort of,
it's a flavor to
something you tack onto your identity. But your identity is action. Your ideology perhaps is action plus thought.
And I think, now that I think about it, that's exactly why the Gareth Cliff debate is such a good example of ideology-based identity and an actual mensch-based identity, where Gareth did not just spout his ideology, that was his contribution to society. He took action. He wrote a letter. And my favorite comment that I read under that debate was one of the top comments that said, this entire debate's tone and direction was determined by the opening remark of the host that asked him why he's writing letters to the president. I thought that was so profound.
Yeah. And really falls in the same trap as well, I'm afraid. People put these people up on their pedestals, but you find out that she's sort of just a common globalist at the end of the day, right? Whether it's good or bad is up to you. But ironic that the big debate was not a debate. It's ironic that in mainstream circles, on mainstream platforms, you don't have debates. You call it whatever you wanted to call it, but it's not a debate. It's purposefully constructed to be antagonizing to everyone, and they know that brings in the clicks. But it's not a debate at all. I think there's an important lesson there somewhere. I'm not too sure what. I'm not too sure where though.
I think my final remark there would be. I kind of have a pet peeve when I see people frame what we do as debates. When you talk to someone on your channel, or Ronaldo talks to someone, or I talk to someone, and people say that was a great debate. No, that's a discussion. If you want to see a debate, I actually did a debate on YFM. It's on my channel. You can see if you search, should the old South African flag be banned on my channel? You'll see that's a debate. These are discussions. You and me disagreed on some things tonight. We didn't completely agree, but that doesn't mean this is a debate. This is just a robust discussion. But I would like to see more debates between, and that's why I want people, more leftists in the alternative media sphere, so I can challenge them to debates and actually have some real conversations with them where someone gives me something to think about.
Well, I mean, Gareth Cliff created that for them. I mean, there were quite a few lefty podcasts on Cliff Central back when we were there. And we tried to partake in some of the debates, and it was just awful, if I remember correctly. But they're not around anymore for some reason. I have my intuition about why that is. But I think once you think that your working environment as a journalist sort of represents your ideology, why would you want to have an alternative?
Right. Well, that's my explanation as well, because when people ask me, why don't you follow more left-wing accounts on Twitter, I was like, I already follow a bunch of mainstream sources. Why would I want to follow more people that just parrot the same thing? So the thing for me is, and that's my explanation when people ask, I ask rhetorically, why don't we have more left-wing alternative media personalities? I know the answer personally. It's because their views are already reflected in the mainstream. Why would you go through all the effort of creating a YouTube channel and creating content if all that content's already polished, perfectly packaged in a mainstream form? I mean, you can just look at my channel. That's why I started doing YouTube in the first place, because I didn't see any type of channel that had my type of views out there from a South African perspective. I did it because I didn't see my views anywhere represented. So I think that same logic applies to why people don't do it as commonly on the left, is they see their views represented.
Yeah, no, they really do. And believe me, Jamil Khan got a lot of support for that. So based on the same facts, you have people having entirely different conclusions, making the case that rationality is something to be learned, not something inherent in humanity. And I think that's the most important to end off on my side. This notion of rationality being the be-all and end-all of everything, and people are inherently rational, I think it's the biggest load of tripe, the biggest myth, the biggest faith-based argument I've ever known. And I think it was punted by the new atheists at the time. And at the time, it made sense, right? Just, religion's a mind virus. Just ignore it. If you ignore the mind virus, look at the evidence, and you'll be free. I tried. It just didn't work out. You find yourself pulled back into things that don't have to make sense, but that work. Red Bull doesn't make sense. Red Bull tastes terrible. It's got the same caffeine content as a cup of coffee, but it's a multi-billion-dollar company. But it works. It doesn't need to make sense. Like, try be more like Red Bull.
And that's what I keep saying, and I think this will be my final remark for tonight will be that I think what we've seen in the world, and this is what Nietzsche actually warned about. So a lot of edgy high school atheists like to say, "Oh, God is dead," and this is their big triumphant cry. But I've read Nietzsche. I don't think they have, and he didn't mean it, as I understand it. He didn't mean it in a triumphant way. It was a cautionary warning. In terms of, if we don't have a God anymore, we're going to either have to become gods ourselves, or we will be dumped into nihilism forever. Without any type of purpose. And I think what we're seeing here is, because we failed to become gods, because our nature has been exposed through the First and Second World War, our fallen nature, of humanity's inherent evil nature, I think we've just fallen into ideology, replaced religion with ideology, a lot of young people specifically. And it's just as dogmatic as any type of dogmatic religion, where they have their own origin myth. You can just look at the South African origin myth. I find very plagiaristic indeed, where you have this Garden of Eden, and then Jan van Riebeeck plops his big boot down on the cape in the sand. And as soon as his boot hits the sand, the world is fallen and dumped into sin and crime and suffering. And pretty much the Garden of Eden is no more. And they've got their own blasphemy laws, words you can't say, things you can't say, people you can't criticize. You've got your own saints. You've got your own writers and people that's pretty much created the canon of your ideology, and they are the saints. So I can go on and on in terms of the the similarities. So I think that's the theme that I'd like to end on, is be cautious that you don't just swap out one form of dogmatism for another and then proclaim yourself enlightened.
Yeah, that's such a vital point. There's actually such a vital point, because a lot of intellectuals in history are responsible, the ones who have the new truth, right? The ones who want to discard the chains of history, the ones that say God is dead because we killed him and we're happy about it. Those are the ones that have caused immense suffering and harm in the world. And if you are a utopian and you think a reset is necessary, and you think tradition and culture is somehow backward or a pathology, yeah, you are the enemy, not of reason, but you're the enemy of humankind. And I will, yeah, fight you greatly, not to the death, perhaps, but I will, the utopian thinking is the biggest fundamental flaw in human nature, and we must not underestimate that by any means.
So yeah, no, I think that's a perfect way to end it. Apparently, according to some in the chat, I just provided Markov Media with his thug life moment. So yeah, Mr. Cabanac, thank you very much for joining me. It was an excellent chat as always. And just the final red carpet for you now is to tell the people that don't know who you are where they can find you.
People don't know who I am? What? No, you can find me everywhere. Just look for Renegade Report or MorningShot or my name, Roman Cabanac, and I'll pop up somewhere, I'm sure. That's what my SEO manager says, so I trust his judgment.
And there's also a link in the description for my more lazier listeners or watchers that you can just click on it. It will take you automatically free of charge to Mr. Cabanac's channel. And yeah,
I appreciate that. And can I just say, Adams, before you go, I think the platform that you have with your sort of discourse that is based on mutual respect is not surprising, because that would mean that I haven't seen it before. But I think I tend to forget sometimes that this is the norm. Discussion is the norm, and it's very good of you to provide such a platform to those of us who might prefer to win the fight rather than understand the opponent. And in this case, I think I'm not your opponent by any means, but it's good of you to have a platform where such ideas can be discussed. It's certainly not being done in many areas of the world, and I just want to say, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, no problem. I think it was a nice new breath of fresh air for you to be answering the questions for a change and not be doing the interview for us.
I appreciate that. And thanks to everyone in the chat. Thanks for everyone for watching. I appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, they've been top class. So anyway, guys, if you're new to the channel, leave a subscribe. I think I will be at 4,000 subscribers tonight. Thank you very much. This episode can serve as a time capsule for the future, where I was excited about 4,000 subscribers. Thank you very much, guys. Have a nice evening, and I'll check you around. And remember my advice, don't just believe what I say, research what I say. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.